All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the 400-year history of a town that holds both breathtaking cultural beauty and a deeply complex modern tragedy. We're talking about Española, New Mexico. It's this incredibly unique place where history isn't just locked away in a textbook somewhere, It's alive. It's something you literally see on the streets, in the stunning local art, and unfortunately, in the very real struggles of its people. So we're going to explore exactly how this resilient community was formed, the wild economic roller coasters it's ridden, and how folks there are fighting back against some truly daunting challenges today.
What's just fascinating right off the bat is this intense juxtaposition. Think about it. How does a small New Mexico town simultaneously serve as a vibrant canvas of cultural pride, literally wearing the title of the Lowrider Capital of the world, while at the exact same time battling one of the highest drug overdose rates in the entire nation? It's a massive paradox that has defined Española for decades. And to really grasp this dual identity, we can't just look at the symptoms of today. We've got to dig into the roots.
So, Section 1, the first Spanish capital. To understand how we got here, we have to move way back in time to see how this community first took shape.
The rapid colonial shifts initiated by Don Juan de Oñate are honestly pretty mind-blowing. Get this, way before Jamestown was even a thought. We're talking 1598. Oñate brought 600 settlers to the exact spot where the Rio Grande meets the Rio Chama. They originally set up camp at a native pueblo they renamed San Juan de los Caballos, and then just a year later, in 1599, moved right across the river to establish San Gabriel. That effectively made the Española area the foundational, absolute first European capital in the United States. The capital officially moved to Santa Fe by 1610, but the seeds of this incredibly complex, blended society, they were already planted right here.
Now, as you might guess, early relations in this new colony were far from perfect. Things were fraught with the intense friction of the encomienda system. Basically, this was a heavy-handed, feudal-style taxation system that forced native Pueblo households to pay tribute to the Spanish settlers, either in crops, goods, or forced labor. And this initial heavy-handed friction between the Spanish and the native communities just kept building up over decades until it eventually exploded into the massive Pueblo Revolt of 1680, which actually managed to drive the Spanish entirely out of New Mexico for 12 years. Yet over generations of conflict and compromise, these clashing cultures actually started to blend. It's a beautiful process known as syncretism. A perfect, tangible example of this incredible merging of Native American spirituality and Roman Catholic devotion is sitting just up the road at the Santuario de Chamayo. It's this world-famous pilgrimage site known for its healing dirt, which totally echoes Native traditions, but it's housed right inside a Catholic chapel built in the early 1800s. It just goes to show how deeply intertwined the cultural DNA of this region really is.
Moving on to Section 2, Boom, Bust, and Science. Let's fast forward to the late 19th century, where we see Española's quiet agricultural roots completely upended by a massive industrial shift.
In 1880, the narrow-gauge Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, affectionately nicknamed the Chili Line, came steaming right into town. The arrival of those tracks transformed this quiet valley into an absolute bustling hub of commerce. Almost overnight, it became the headquarters for the multi-million-dollar Frank Bond mercantile empire. You had Anglo merchants, mountain men, and new settlers filtering into what was a predominantly Hispanic population. Española suddenly incorporated as a thriving city, totally fueled by trade and this brand new connection to the outside world.
But, as we know, economic booms aren't always built to last. By 1941, the railroad stopped being profitable, so it was abandoned. They literally pulled the tracks right out of the ground. This plunged the local economy into a devastating bust. Without the trains, trade just completely dried up. Locals were left jobless, homes right in the middle of downtown were abandoned, and a ton of people were forced to either revert back to subsistence farming or just leave town altogether to find work. Española was suddenly cut off.
And this, right here, is a totally, absolutely crucial turning point. Because right as Española lost its railroad and its lifeline, the Manhattan Project began just up the hill. Today, Española sits practically in the shadow of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is this massive hub of immense wealth and high scientific funding. Meanwhile, Española itself struggles deeply with high poverty rates, a severely lacking local tax revenue base, and a shortage of professional housing. Yes, the lab provides jobs for some locals, but the stark, everyday contrast between the billions of dollars flowing into Los Alamos and the deep economic struggles in the valley below, it's profound.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Lowrider Capital of the world. Because despite all these economic hardships, the spirit of the people here never broke, not even close.
By the 1980s, the community sparked this massive, brilliant cultural renaissance, officially proudly declaring itself the Lowrider Capital of the world. They channeled all of their heritage into these rolling works of art, and you have to understand, lowriding in Española is not just about having a cool car. It rests on 4 vital pillars: pride, faith, art, and tradition. You see it everywhere: rosaries hanging from the rearview mirrors, these intricate, jaw-dropping murals of religious figures painted right on the hoods, and families passing down complex mechanical skills generation after generation. It's this incredibly vibrant expression of identity. They took something purely mechanical and transformed it into a profound symbol of cultural resilience.
But we really have to ask the hard question. What happens when a historic, deeply beautiful cultural hub is completely overshadowed by long-term economic stagnation? How does this dual identity work when you have such vibrant art and deep faith existing right alongside devastating socioeconomic realities where good jobs are scarce and generational poverty has really set in? It creates deep vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities that, unfortunately, can be very easily exploited.
And that leads us into our final section: epidemic, resilience, and hope. Let's look impartially at the root causes and the harsh daily realities of the substance abuse epidemic that really took hold here in the 1970s and 80s.
Now, this number is just staggering, 43. At its absolute worst, there were 43 drug-related deaths per 100,000 people in Española. To put that into perspective for you, the national average for a long time was hovering right around 7. This astronomical overdose rate was initially driven by black tar and brown powder heroin flowing up from Mexico. And it meant that almost every single person in the community knew someone, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, that they had lost.
And when you ground that data in real human accounts, you see the profound, devastating personal tragedy behind the statistics. As one former addict shared in our sources, it eventually becomes a total loss of identity. It might start as an escape from the heavy pressures of life, or just experimenting back in high school, but it ends with losing your family, losing your home, and winding up on the streets. It is a deeply painful reality that so many families in this valley have had to navigate.
And the sources clearly tell us that the crisis isn't static, it's evolving right now. While heroin and opioids were the primary destructive forces for decades, users are now shifting heavily towards methamphetamines. Why? Because meth is cheaper and it's highly accessible. But this shift brings entirely new, highly volatile behavioral challenges to the streets, making the situation even more unpredictable and dangerous for both the users themselves and the community at large.
But to really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the actual science of what's happening. The experts in our sources make it very clear. This addiction is not a moral failing. It is a chronic neurological disease that often starts out as self-medication. Chronic drug use literally thickens the neural pathways in the midbrain, which is your fight-or-flight survival center, and it hijacks the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles logical decision-making. Basically, the brain gets rewired to believe that acquiring the drug is literally as essential to your physical survival as breathing oxygen. And the ripple effect of this, it creates a truly tragic generational cycle. When a generation of parents is lost to addiction, incarceration, or death, the burden naturally falls on the elders. Get this, an estimated 60% of youth in the valley are being raised by their grandparents. At one particularly dark point, nearly a third of babies born at the local hospital were exposed to opioids. This level of severe generational trauma completely overwhelms the local schools. You have incredibly dedicated teachers who are essentially forced to act as counselors, nurses, and social workers for kids who are simultaneously facing high poverty and hunger.
The strain on the local system is just immense. First responders and law enforcement are out there doing their absolute best to carry this heavy burden every single day. But imagine a department of only 27 police officers tasked with handling up to 15 violent crimes a month, on top of hundreds of other routine calls, all across a severely underfunded jurisdiction. Because there's such a lack of a strong local tax base, they are heavily handicapped in their ability to effectively combat the crisis or provide the kind of widespread community resources they desperately need.
Yet, right smack in the middle of all this hardship, the community is fiercely fighting back. Let me be clear, this is not a story of defeat. People are stepping up with unbelievable heart and grit. Initiatives like communities and schools are providing what they call wraparound support. We're talking food, counseling, and tutoring, meeting the kids exactly where they are. You have grassroots peer recovery programs, the new Pathway Shelter offering a lifeline for the unhoused, and local artists mentoring the youth. It all showcases a community absolutely determined to heal itself from the inside out.
Which leaves us with this final, really powerful thought to wrap up this explainer.
Española literally has 400 years of survival woven right into its DNA. It has weathered colonization, violent uprisings, and devastating economic collapse. So the big question now is, will that deep-rooted, incredible cultural resilience be enough to help them overcome this dark chapter and reclaim their future? Thanks so much for diving into the complex, beautiful story of this community with me.